Oh boy, King of the Hill is finally making a return on this channel. Now I was surfing through this show and I just so happened to come across a very disturbing episode. This might actually be one of the most disturbing episodes out of the entire series, and this show has a lot of seasons, my guy. So without further ado, smash that like button and subscribe if you would like. Now let's get into this episode. Now this episode kicks off with Bobby and Joseph dumpster diving because yeah, that's what 12 and 13-year-olds do, I guess. Now while they were doing this, Bobby just so happens to find a cigarette carton with a single cigarette still in the box. Now Bobby had stated that he never in his life had a cigarette. Joseph says,
"Well, how about you? Only secondhand from my dad."
Now this is when things take a left turn for the worse. Man, it's just something about those freaking left turns, I swear. Now they catch the door after some guy was done using the restroom and had decided this was where they were going to spark the cigarette up. Now as they were doing this, someone knocks on the door, and yeah, you won't believe who was at the door. Somehow Hank had ended up at the same exact place as them. Talk about bad luck. This is when this happens.
"Is this John occupied? Es esta Juan ocupado?"
See.
Bobby, is that you?
Hank opens the door and catches Bobby and Joseph smoking. And it was way worse on Bobby because he had actually had the cigarette in his mouth at the time. And Hank is obviously horrified by what he just witnessed. I mean, just look at his face. Now they had made it back home by this point and they were going in on Bobby.
Didn't you read this? Cancer, heart disease, emphysema.
Well, I thought those were the ingredients.
Hey, do not be a smart mouth, young man.
Bruh. Now Peggy tells Bobby that smoking is a filthy habit and only trailer trash smoke. Now do you want to look like trailer trash? And as she's saying this to Bobby, Luann somehow thinks Peggy is talking to her, so she just has a mental breakdown.
Only trailer trash smoke nowadays. Now, do you want to look like trailer trash?
That's not fair. I don't smoke.
But anyways, this is when things take a dark turn. Hank decides to take Bobby outside and make this man smoke a whole carton of cigarettes. Yeah, apparently Hank thought this was a good idea. This has to be one of the worst ideas I've ever seen. Bro, imagine your parents catching you smoking weed and then as your punishment, they go buy you a half and say, yeah, you're gonna smoke this entire thing. Okay. Hand me my big lighter, my guy. But anyways, Hank says,
Start puffing, boy. We gotta get through 200 of these.
Ridiculous. Now we switch over to Joseph and Dale, and things were going a lot smoother on their end. Dale actually tries to educate his son on the dangers of smoking and pulls out some books for him to read. Yeah, this is what good parenting looks like. Now as we transition back to this abomination here, Hank was getting annoyed at Bobby because apparently he wasn't holding a cigarette right. Imagine that. Then he gets annoyed by the way Bobby was puffing them. It's like at this point Hank is forgetting this is a punishment. Does it really matter? Now I don't know if you knew this, but back in the day when Hank was young, he smoked cigarettes all the time. Actually, he was addicted to them. I mean, just look at this man take that first hit. Now Hank didn't even hand Bobby the cigarette back, and before you know it, he had smoked the entire thing. This man was even doing tricks with the cigarette, which is making Bobby want to smoke even more. Now as you can see in Bobby's face, he's absolutely smacked on nicotine and he even barfs. Hank thinks he has done a good thing and made his son sick of cigarettes, but this isn't what happened at all. notice anything about their behavior? Yeah, it should be obvious. Not only is Hank hooked on nicotine again, but his 11-year-old son is now hooked as well. And yes, in season 1, Bobby was still 11. This is horrible. Now, Peggy notices Hank couldn't sleep and had asked him what was troubling him. She says, "Oh, is it about Bobby?" Hank was like, "Nah, I handled that earlier. I made him smoke an entire carton of cigarettes until he was as sick as he's ever been." And now after hearing this, Peggy says,
Hank Hill, what on God's earth were you thinking? He is just a little boy.
see, even Peggy thinks Hank is a dumbass. How could he possibly think this was a good idea? But this is when the episode gets darker. Hank turns off the light and they head to bed. Or so you thought. Hank makes an excuse to get out of bed and he goes outside to feed his addiction. And as he's sparking up, guess who else was as well? Yeah, it was 11-year-old Bobby, and he was smoking a cigarette just like Hank had showed him earlier. Bobby's addiction had gotten so bad that he couldn't even focus in class. All he could think about was cigarettes. And Hank wasn't any better because he also couldn't focus at work. Kinda reminds me of Chocolate Boy from Hey Arnold, but that's a whole nother video of itself. Now, as this episode progresses, Hank and Peggy were out eating when Hank pulls out a cigarette. Peggy says,
Hank, what are you doing?
Well.
and before you know it, they were reminiscing.
Oh, Hank.
That's right.
And after this happens, Peggy was basically back smoking cigarettes as well. This now means Hank has gotten his entire family hooked on nicotine. Now the guys were standing outside, and as we all know, this is the norm for them. But this day, Hank had lit a cig, and the guys couldn't believe it. Boomhauer was even complaining about it.
Hey, man, y'all don't put that dang old thing out, man. Y'all gonna lighten up like that, man. You're gonna do just like a dang old junkie, man.
Absolutely hilarious, bruh. Now it was later that night, and Bobby had decided that he would sneak a cigarette in his room, but this man had caused a small fire and the smoke detector had went off. This is when Hank and Peggy storm in to catch Bobby smoking again. Now what happens next is hilarious.
Do I have to take you out back with another carton of cigarettes?
I think you do.
Bruh, Bobby funny as But anyways, Luann says, "Don't you guys know more people die from smoking than in war?" She says, "I'm begging you guys, please put the cigarettes down forever." Now, I really appreciate Luann for this because she was genuinely concerned. Peggy says Luann is right, Hank. How can we expect Bobby to quit if we don't quit ourselves? They then drop their cigarettes on the floor, and this man Bobby says,
Hey, that's my rug.
this man Bobby. Now this is when this episode switches gears, and by that I mean it gets funny as hell. The Hills attend a meeting for people addicted to cigarettes, and while he ends up seeing Bill there for some reason, this entire meeting goes completely left. Now the instructor had said that Hank was weak because he didn't want to stand up and tell everyone how long he had been smoking. When Hank says this,
You're calling me weak? Look at your little birdie arms. They're no thicker than a cigarette. I could smoke them little arms.
bruh, it doesn't stop there. The entire place then finds out Bobby is Hank's son, and he wasn't just there supporting his dad. He was there because he was addicted too. The crowd couldn't believe it because of how young Bobby was, and Hank tries to stand up and justify this stupid punishment, and the instructor tells Hank he's sick and shouldn't be allowed to have children. This is when this man throws a temper tantrum and storms out. Now it was later that night, and this man Hank was up trying to sneak a cigarette, but Luann catches him, and she had also called the rest of the family in the kitchen also. Now things get a bit crazy because when Peggy decides to steal the last cigarette that Hank was about to smoke, Bobby then joins in and they all end up fighting over it.
Women and children first. I take the first puff. Bobby here gets a second. If there's anything left, You.
Now Hank and Bobby decide to gang up on Peggy so they can share the last cigarette, but Peggy ends up throwing it out the window, and basically they have to make it through the storm without any tobacco. What was also crazy about this is that the cigarette Peggy threw out the window ended up landing in a prison cell. But as we can see, the family makes it through the storm, and they had ended up passing through this addiction phase, promising each other to never smoke again. Yeah, King of the Hill were putting out crazy episodes, bro. It makes sense that this show is on Adult Swim. But with that being said, I would love to hear you guys' opinion about this crazy episode in the comments down below. And until next time, peace.